Say brr.
Brrr.
Brr. See, I'm teaching Max some Spanish here, and basically all I know in Spanish is how to roll my R's. Brr. Latin America was built for these money printing days. Money printer go brr, brr. Hablaría español, pero no puedo. So we'll continue speaking English. Max, we are here with Talentland in Jalisco, Mexico. And I want to say the last time we were in Mexico, we bought our friend here in CDMX, and that is Guillermo. He is the new central banker to replace Plucky, who used to be a central banker for fiat currencies. We're now entering the period of quantitative hardening with Bitcoin.
Oh, really? What does Plucky have to say about this?
Well, Plucky's on the
let's see what
floor.
Plucky has
He's
to
a
say.
big floppy guy.
Hello, Plucky. There he is, Plucky. What do you have to say about Guillermo taking over as central banker? Guillermo doesn't know anything about money, doesn't know anything about central banking. I'm Plucky. I know everything about central banking. I told them they should have raised interest rates for the last 10 years. Plucky, you know that if the central banks raised interest rates for the past 10 years, the property market and the stock market would have collapsed. What are they doing now? What are they doing now? What are they doing now? They're collapsing. They just deferred the collapse. That's all they did. They could have saved the economy earlier by raising rates and restoring integrity to money. Now, and the only thing people have is Bitcoin. Right, Guillermo?
I'm sorry if that is like blowing out your eardrums out there, but that is the way we have now. Guillermo, and by the way, with his guitar there, his little ukulele sort of thing.
That's a guitar.
Yeah, well, I kind of imagining that Western, the spaghetti Western sort of music. Yeah. Well, that's a good tune for this because the day of reckoning is coming. And the bad guys are about to get squashed, essentially. So we've been looking at, this money printer go brrr is just it's just so perfect timing for Bitcoin about to face the halving. So we're going to see the Bitcoin mining block go from 12.5 Bitcoin every 10 minutes to 6.25. So how do you reckon that's going to play out around the world?
Well, the Bitcoin halving is a big event, and it's all baked into the Bitcoin protocol and the Genesis block. And everything that we are seeing today in the year 2020 in global financial meltdown was foreseen by Satoshi. Satoshi knew it was all coming, and it's all baked into the cake, into the protocol Bitcoin Genesis block. And of course, we've got chaos in 2020. We've got a presidential election in America in 2020, and Bitcoin is going to halve the rate of issuance every 10 minutes. That makes it even less inflationary than gold, because gold supply increases by a certain rate per year based on mining. Now Bitcoin is going to be less issuance of Bitcoin per year, so it's still the deflationary trend that will take us into 2030, 2040, and the price goes to 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, ultimately in the 400,000 range to compete with gold.
Brrr. Money printer go brrr. I'm glad I took some Spanish in school because Bitcoin garners new users as governments flood world with fiat. This is from Yahoo Finance. That is Jerome Powell, the biggest, the capo de capo of money printers around the world. This guy gets to print more than anybody else, and he gets to tell who gets to print any other currency of their own choice. It says governments around the world are careening toward a period of dramatic spending.
Look, the only money that's accepted by any government is fiat money. There is no other choice but fiat money. And what is fiat money? Fiat money is debt money. It's debt that's issued. The dollar is a claim put out by the U.S. government. It's debt. It's a debt. It's a coupon that's based on debt. It's not hard money. It has no backing other than the fact that it's a loan to people from the government. It's all debt money. So sometimes when the debt money issuing is less than normal, we call that inflation. Sometimes when the debt money issued is more than normal, we call that deflation. And it's been going on for 40 years, this inflation, deflation. but it's a bit of a misnomer because it only refers to the rate at which the debt money is issued, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. And now we're at a point where we've hit the point of no return, where the issuance of debt money must now expand exponentially. It's a crack up boom, as Hyman Minsky would describe it, and it will result in massive bifurcation of the economy between the have-yachts and the have-nots. There'll be no more middle class. We already see food riots around the world. That's because of this fiat money scam that's been perpetrated for 40 years. And Jay Powell is happy to brrr all the money he wants. Gold is already breaking out against all major currencies, new all-time highs. It's going to be breaking out against the US dollar, new all-time highs. Look at the gold price versus the Mexican peso. It's skyrocketing. This is true all over the world. Gold is leading, where Bitcoin will then bust out, make new all-time highs, and then overtake gold, because at some point people won't be able to get gold. It's hard to get gold. It's hard to move gold. It's hard to verify gold. It's easy to get Bitcoin. It's easy to move Bitcoin. It's easy to verify Bitcoin. It's going to $400,000 a coin. It's not too difficult to imagine that when the dollar crashes in value. Bitcoin's going to infinity against the dollar because the dollar's going to zero. Mexican peso's going to zero. Euro's going to zero. Yen's going to zero. Chinese yuan going to zero against Bitcoin. They're all in hyperinflationary collapses against Bitcoin.
You know what's hard is changing your outlook on life, getting used to things being more difficult, because the closer you are to the money printers, and as I said, Jerome Powell is the capo de capo of money printers, so those on Wall Street live the closest and they get the money first. Then it trickles out into the rest of the economy, other CEOs, powerful people, the elite in Hollywood, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C., and then it trickles down to other Americans, and then it trickles out to the rest of the world. So we are privileged in one way in this system where we get to, everything is always taken care of for us by money printing. Those in Mexico, those in Colombia, those in Argentina, those in Brazil, those in India, those in all of Africa, they don't have that privilege, one could say, that exorbitant privilege, and yet we're disadvantaged by having that privilege. And I want to point to something, these charts from local CoinDance about local Bitcoins, and it shows you the difference between Argentina and Australia in terms of Bitcoin adoption from local Bitcoins. And you see the Australians think like speculators because, well, we're speculators because that plays into their debt games and their money printing games, and they get bailed out. Australians are closer, they're English speaking, they're part of the Five Eyes, they're closer to the US Federal Reserve. They get bailed out if their bets go wrong. You've seen their 30-year housing bubble as part of that situation where they get bailed out all the time and they don't ever have to work. They don't, most of us in the US, England, Britain, Ireland, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, that we've never really had to work and create wealth in the past 30, 40 years since money printer go brrr, they print it for our behalf. But as you see with Argentina, they don't have that luxury to be so decadent, slothful, and just like, oh, I'm going to do all of these, take all sorts of risks that won't possibly pay off, but I know the Fed will bail me out. You're not going to be bailed out if you're outside that US, the plucky system, the money printer go brr, brr.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So when we were in Buenos Aires and all over Latin America just a few months ago, the people in Latin America, in Rio de Janeiro, Buenos Aires, Mexico City, were serious about Bitcoin because it's their lifesaver. It's their way out of decades of colonization by American central banks. So Latin America has been colonized by American central banks for decades. And they've never had a way to escape it without, the U.S. sending in, as John Perkins wrote brilliantly in his book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. If they don't play ball in South America, then the U.S. sends in the snipers and the kidnappers. But now, finally, the people have a way to escape the colonization of their economies by America vis-a-vis Bitcoin. And that's why in Argentina, local Bitcoins, you see the adoption chart go up. Even though the 2017 bubble doesn't really make a huge impact on that chart
No.
because people are buying it every single day, no matter what the price is. They're buying it because their life depends on it, and it does, and they should continue to do so.
Well, in terms of your life depends on it. So there's Argentina, there's Australia. They got wrapped up in the hyper speculative bubble back in 2017, and then they abandoned it. You know, right now we're in this pandemic, and you see that mindset between so in the US, the government said, oh, you don't need face masks, everything's fine. So everybody continued around their business, going out dancing, having their lattes and not stocking up on supplies, not having masks. And then the country gets shut down. And then week 1, week 2, week 3, and you're starting to notice, well, where are the food supplies? Like, why is there so much shortage? And are we ever going to return to the economy? Are we ever going to be able to work again? Well, shouldn't we have masks? Now it's, do you hear that beep? That's Max's tarta de queso.
My cheesecake. Another cheesecake in the Instapot, ready to come out. Yummy.
You see, we're self-sovereign now.
I learned this recipe from from Plucky.
Plucky.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think you would learn it from Guillermo. He's about hardening, the quantitative hardening coming. But like I'm saying, their life depended on it, but they believed these authorities could just magic up manufacturing of masks, which do not exist. Hospitals, doctors and nurses are going into the front line confronting death every day with this pandemic, and they have garbage bags on them.
Yeah.
And that shows you that we're all in the same boat. Anybody outside money printer go brrr. Anybody outside that, you're just fodder for their unpayable debts.
Right. Well, why is this? Because if you live in an economy like the United States and you're wealthy, you can increase your wealth by having the government give you more printed money. And what happens is that you have the vast majority of folks who believe that they're going to work hard and they're going to pay their taxes and then they're going to become successful and they'll work their way up, the so-called American dream. And what they find out is that the $3.5 trillion that Americans paid in taxes last year is actually irrelevant, because if Wall Street can tell the government to spin up, or as you say, magic up, $6.5 trillion in an afternoon, and that's going to be 15 trillion, and soon it's going to be 25 and 35 trillion dollars, and they can just do that in a heartbeat by clicking on a few buttons. They don't need that $3.5 trillion in tax money. Workers are irrelevant in the American economy. Workers are expendable in the American economy. Healthcare workers that need masks are not important in the American economy when you have a kleptocratic, entrenched oligarchy that can just print trillions of dollars on a whim and go and take a jet to a chateau in Switzerland and hide out for 6 months or 2 years or 3 years. This is neo-feudalism is what we're heading toward, and that's how you get there. And same thing as I make the comparison in Saudi Arabia, you have princes and you have peasants. When the princes want more money, they pump more oil. They don't need the peasants to pump the oil. So they don't get any rights in Saudi Arabia. Just like in America, they don't have any rights anymore because the princes in America don't need them anymore. They can just print money. They don't need anybody anymore at any time. And that's how you get to neo-feudalism. And right now, the die has been cast. There's no going back at this point. Once the Humpty Dumpty falls down and breaks, all the king's horses and all the king's men are in a chalet in Switzerland drinking Moet.
Again, I turn to Guillermo, the star of many spaghetti westerns. We have a good keto spaghetti these days.
Yeah, we do, yeah.
It's like some sort of Asian noodle.
It's a noodle, but it tastes like spaghetti. So it's no carbohydrates.
And by the way, sorry we're not in Jalisco, because of course we wanted to be in Jalisco.
We're not?
No, we're not in Jalisco, Max. I know you never know quite where we are, but of course we have not been able to travel for quite a few weeks. But I do have my silver. This is genuine Mexican silver, plata.
Yeah, everyone's chipping in. Everyone's helping out. Plucky has a YouTube channel now. Plucky's YouTube channel. It's called Dancing Chicken. I'm a dancing chicken. My name is Plucky. I'm a dancing chicken. just to give you a preview of what you find on Plucky's YouTube channel. Don't touch Plucky!
Well, I wanted to do Money Printer Go brrr, because that's from, if you know the history of Plucky, Plucky is a central banker. He actually has appeared as an expert at the conference in Kilkenny, the Kilkenomics Festival. He
was a featured guest, David McWilliams. He had him do the special interview on the Saturday night in Kilkenomics. And he was a smash hit. You know, he proved to be correct. Everything he forecasted has been proven to be true. You had to raise interest rates 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago. And this idea that you have to save the housing bubble and you can't raise rates. Well, what happened? The housing has crashed, stocks are, it's all messed up, and it could have been avoided.
These money printers, these guys who go brrr, who print and print and print for their friends, and it's getting more and more blatant. I mean, they tried to be subtle about it to keep their game going. You know, when they bailed out in 1987, the stock market crash, and then 98, the long-term capital management crash, and then 2000, 2001, the dot-com crash, and they kept lowering interest rates, and they kept giving more money, free money to the bankers, you know, part of the Federal Reserve System. And then 2008, they bailed out a lot of these hedge funds with this, and the insurance companies, AIG sort of companies, Warren Buffett sort of companies. And now this time with this collapse, they're not even pretending. They're just bailing out. They're buying ETFs, junk bond ETFs. They're against the law. The mandate, it's against the Constitution for the Federal Reserve to be buying these things, but they're buying these things. And the one thing that has kept this scheme going since 1971, when we went off the global gold standard, was that we all participated in this. Basically, these guys who go brrr, they divide us. They're the ones that put up these walls and convinced, you know, those furthest from the money printing within the United States, those who only get the food stamps, which is the end of that money printing. You know, they turn each other, all of us, against each other, and look to the lords, like in this feudal system.
From trillion-dollar platinum coins to food stamps.
Yes. So even that trillion-dollar platinum coin would come, this notion in America would come from the Treasury, which is the people, which is real money. The Fed doesn't print money. They can't print real money. All they do is print credit, which means that they're stealing your future. They're stealing all of our futures, not just Americans, but around the world, because that's what empires do. They pillage Mexico, they pillage Africa, they pillage Asia, they pillage Latin America, because that's how they collateralize your wealth and our future. This is what they do with money printing.
That's what they do. They've been doing it in ever greater magnitude. So the role of the Fed as a lender of last resort is there's a backstop against bank failure. And so during the 1970s, when Paul Volcker was running the central bank in America, the Federal Reserve, he would raise interest rates dramatically to try to put a floor underneath the kind of abuses that were going on in the economy, and to increase the value of the currency and make it as hard as money as he could, given the tools available. That would be raising or lowering interest rates. Now, starting with Alan Greenspan in 1980s and 1987 in particular, he became an activist Federal Reserve chairman, which means he's trying to steer the economy. And he abandoned the idea that the Fed was there to take the punch bowl away from the party before it gets too raucous. Instead, Alan Greenspan said, we have no way to know when the crashes are going to come. The only policy measure that we have is to just keep printing. And so this gave birth to the so-called Greenspan put, which is that every time the market crashes, they would just flood the system with more money. And then 87 happened, 1987, the crash, so market rallied. Then there was a big bond down move in 94. They printed a lot of money. Then there was the dot-com crash. They printed a lot of money. Then there was the subprime crash of 2008. They kept printing ever more exponential amounts of money. And everyone loved it, as you say. Everyone was participating. Everyone believed that it was a magic money tree. Everyone believed that infinite wealth was a possibility. And now 2020 hits and the COVID-19 pandemic hits, and suddenly supply chains get cut. And that, like pulling the rug underneath the Ponzi scheme. It's like the day Bernie Madoff had to come clean and say, I have to admit that my actions were not entirely innocent. This is what the Federal Reserve, this is what Jay Powell needs to go on TV and say, we have to admit that the actions of the Federal Reserve Bank these past 40, 45 years have not been entirely innocent. We've been perpetrating a massive fraud on the global economy. But no, they won't do that. Instead, they're going to print even greater quantities of money. How much money? Well, they printed 5 trillion, 6 trillion in the last 6, 8 months. And to get to 100% of GDP, they're going to have to raise it up to 20, 25 trillion. So they got another 15, 20 trillion to print. And it's going to be a real crazy show.
But money printer go brrr. I'm telling you, it's going to end. It's going to end. There is an end in sight, I believe now. There wasn't in 1971. There was an option there because that's when the U.S. defaulted to the rest of the world, and they went along with it. They didn't demand payment in gold as they were due, but they went along with it. And it's at the end game now. So at least there's that, because it will be difficult. End of empire, this is the end of the U.S. empire, is always a difficult time. End of the debt empire, it's an empire of debt. This debt disappearing deflation is not fun. We are going to have the highest unemployment in America since the Great Depression. We see, however, this was a great image taken from CNBC. Jim Cramer showed Cantillon effect. As you see, Jim Cramer was boasting the Dow's best week since 1938, because of course stock markets always do rally the hardest during vicious bear markets. So it's a bear market, but more than 16 million Americans have lost jobs in 3 weeks. So the ordinary person in America is suffering. The ordinary person in Latin America was already suffering. The peso is down 20% this year alone. The Mexican peso, the Colombian peso is also down 20%. The Argentinian peso is down even more. The Mexican economy is due to fall by 8% this year. Latin America in general is due to fall by 4.6% this year in terms of GDP. But remember, these are all GDPs in this fiat currency system that is collapsing. So it will be a difficult period, I think, coming up. But there is that individual sovereignty. You're still you. You still have your family. You still have you. You still have your talent. You still have your wealth creating capacity. You still have your innovation and your ideas and your creativity. That's still available, and that nobody can take that. They've tried to collateralize it with all these debts, with all these money print and grow. But those days are over. And if you could just survive through this, on the other side, it's our turn.
Oh, how's Bitcoin doing against the Mexican peso? It's doing great. So how's it doing against all of the fiat money? Doing great. So if there's one thing to leave everybody with, is that simple message that if you want individual sovereignty, if you want to preserve wealth, if you want dignity, you got to own as much Bitcoin as you possibly can. That's what Guillermo is all about. Guillermo is the god of Bitcoin. I'm the bishop of Bitcoin. I am Satoshi's representative here on Earth. And Plucky, of course, is...
His day's over.
Stacy, don't say that! You know that my YouTube channel is getting a lot more views than freaking Keiser Report. So, that's there. There's that to be the truth, okay?
His days are numbered. Money printer, go. That's it. That's the end of this session with Max and Stacey. It's not what we were expecting, but we're all innovate, we're all creative, we just come up with new ideas, and we have Bitcoin Nation. We're all the same. Anybody who loves Bitcoin is part of our people. We are all one people. Wherever we go,
we are the world. We love Plucky. We buy Bitcoin. We're individually sovereign, and the central banks can go to hell. Time to say goodbye. We hope you have a great conference on virtual reality. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Adios.
Goodbye.
Say Spanish. Adios.
I'm not talking Spanish. I don't care.